Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Creative Youth Studio. My name is Vietka, a programs manager at the Oak Globe. And if you can't tell, it is Halloween week. I know it's a little atypical this year, but we still wanted to dress up here at Creative Youth Studio in the Oak Globe. So, in honor of Dr. Seuss, I am Thing One. Here, I'll stand up just a little bit. I couldn't find my blue extensions, so these are my blue earmuffs that I got from a dear friend. And I also want to introduce a couple of other people here. We had a summer Shakespeare studio this year that was all virtual, and one of the people that stood out actually for her costume design is Katrina Heil. You might know her from the Romeo and Juliet production that we did this past summer. She is a sophomore at Valhalla High School. She's a theater kid through and through. Her favorite roles include Charlotte in Pride and Prejudice. She was Longan, is that right? Logan in the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Oh, that's fun. I was a spelling bee champion when I was little. She was Gladys in American Christmas. She was also in The Grinch, which is automatically making her part of our family. And so we are just really excited to have her here. She loves reading, writing, and spending time with her friends and family. And today she is spending time with us. So welcome, Katrina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for today, like literally so jittery right now. And I have the pleasure of introducing Shelly Williams, and I had the pleasure of working with her when we did The Grinch all those years ago, and then again when we did the Summer Shakespeare Studio. So hi, Shelly.
Hi, how are you? It's so good to see you, even via Zoom and Facebook.
Yeah, it's good to
Your
see you.
cat ears.
Yeah, I had my cat ears for Halloween and my whiskers, and I love your little devil horns. Very nice.
Yes, thank you. I'm a devil in a blue dress.
So I know everyone is so excited to get to our interview, but beforehand, I just have a little question to ask Shelly. What got you into being a costume designer in the first place? It's such a cool profession, and I'm just interested.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I was super into theater, loved theater. But we just put on plays. We had an art teacher, a really great art teacher named Mrs. Miller, who would make all of our costumes for us, and they were gorgeous. But we were just actors in the play. I didn't really think about costume design other than, really liking Mrs. Miller's work. And then I went to a liberal arts college right out of high school. And in that program, we just auditioned for everything. So we were just auditioned for shows, and we were in the shows, not even sure who did the design stuff in that university. I was only there for a couple years. And then I ended up at Cal State Fullerton. And when I got there, they asked me what I wanted my emphasis to be in. And I was like, what do you mean? What are you saying? There's other options. And, that opened my eyes to the other design areas. And I was already taking a makeup class. So I fell into the design area. My bachelor's degree is in costume and makeup design. So those kind of go under the same umbrella of costume design. But then we also have lighting designers. Somebody has to light the show so that people can see it. We have sound designers who do all the music and all the sound you're in the show, scenic design. And then the prop design falls under the scenic umbrella. So that's all the things that you see on stage, the furniture and the books and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it. Cal State Fullerton opened my eyes to a world of theater.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Like what you said, a lot of times people don't realize that there is an entire world happening behind the actors that you see on stage. There's the costume designers, all of the tech designers, stage managers, backstage hands, things like that. Like we don't appreciate people backstage enough. But I remember when we did the Summer Shakespeare Studio, you provided a lot of resources that we could use when we were making our own costumes, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was fun. When we did that, we wanted to kind of just give you guys tools, because the Summer Shakespeare Festival, you guys were doing Romeo and Juliet, but you weren't doing the play strictly from the text. You were using that as a jumping point to do other artistic things. So we wanted to give you tools in that little kit so that you could be creative in what you were wearing as well as what you were doing. I think just if people like costume design, if you're trying to figure out what area you might be interested in from those different design areas. If you find yourself being like a people watcher and just watching everyone and looking at what they're wearing and trying to figure out what that says about them, and what their social or economical status might be, how they want to present themselves, how they want to be seen, or how they're allowed to be seen, then costume might be for you. If you are really interested in how light plays on different objects, then maybe you're a lighting designer. So I think some of those things you kind of figure out what design line you want to go into just by how you live your life day to day and what you find interesting.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I totally forgot to mention at the beginning, if you have any questions for Shelly about her experience as a costume designer or anything related to those fields, feel free to drop it in the chat that you're in, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or whatever you're on. I'm sure Shelly would be happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, I have another question. What's it like to be, if we wanted to be a costume designer, like if we wanted to be a costume designer as a profession, or if we wanted to do it for fun, what would we do to get into that field? Like, what is unique about being a costume designer that we would need to do?
Well, so if you want to be costume designer, first, I think I want to tell you about costume designers' cousins. The cousins of costume design, and that's fashion design. So fashion design is different from costume design. Those are two different areas. If you're a fashion designer, you're designing clothes that are going to be commercially made and purchased, or are there for a runway. So they're only about the clothes, the person, that's it. But when you're a costume designer, it's about fleshing out the character, the people in a play with a specific time period and a specific time of the year, or time of the day. All these things influence what you're going to pick for them to wear. And there's also stylists, which are similar to fashion and costume designers, but stylists will purchase clothes, retail clothes for a specific client who wants to project themselves in a certain way. So they'll they have an event to go to, or sometimes stylists are used in music videos, stuff like that, or for a photo shoot, any of that kind of stuff. So that's the differences between fashion, costume, and being a stylist. I'm going to take a sip of water. So the things that might be helpful if you want to get into costume design, you can go to college if you want to. It's not required. If you want to teach at some point on the university level, you have to have a master's. But other than that, it's not necessary. But there are good classes when you go to college for a bachelor's degree. You can learn about the other design areas, so you'll be better at collaborating. You can learn about costume history. You can learn about play analysis, so you're really good at kind of analyzing a play. And then it's also useful if you go into costume design to know how to use different programs. A lot of people, their online presence is really important if you're a costume designer. So you have a website that shows your work so other people can see it, and it's good in developing relationships with directors so that you can work closely with them. You need to be able to sort of read the room when you're in a fitting. You need to kind of be able to judge the comfort level of the actor. It's kind of a vulnerable place to be. So you need to be a good people person too. And, also have to develop ways to communicate your design. So mostly we use the computer a lot with the drop boxes, with emails, with descriptions, with research, but then we also render. So you'll draw the costumes, even if you're not building it. You'll need to render something to show to the director and the other designers to communicate your design. So there's some images that I want to show you that we'll talk about that. There's a book cover. See that book cover in the middle? That is a book called Costume Design by Lynn Pechtel. And Lynn Pechtel has interviewed in this book like 19 different designers. And so if you're interested in costume design, it's a really interesting book to read because they'll tell you all the ways that they started and how their careers are going. And there's different ways you can render. In the upper left corner, there's a design by Greg Barnes, who's an associate artist who at the Globe. And a San Diego native too. He's from San Diego. He usually designs, he uses watercolor. You can see in that picture, that's a watercolor painting. Right under that's Bob Mackie. Bob Mackie designed a lot for Cher and for Carol Burnett, the Carol Burnett show. You remember the curtain dress out of the curtains. But here's a rendering from Bob Mackie for the Supremes, and that is entirely marker. So he has utilized markers to do that rendering. In the upper right corner is a designer named Patton Campbell. I kind of love this style. I've tried it before myself. It's fun to do, where instead of starting with a light or a neutral piece of paper and then showing highlights and shadows, they're starting with a dark piece of paper and then bringing forth the highlights and the lighter parts to kind of get that design across. The bottom right is Lewis Brown, associate artist. His renderings he would do in acrylic paint. So he's also one of the few designers that I know that doesn't do, a lot of times a designer will do a pencil sketch first to kind of figure out their design before they go into the complete artwork of it. He's the only one I know that never does that. He would just go straight into acrylic paint and on a big canvas, and he would paint it. If he didn't like it, he would put white gesso over the top of it and start it over again. So, yeah.
Wow.
Then the next one here, some more rendering styles. On the left is some work by David Reynoso. Those are from Ebenezer Scrooge's big San Diego Christmas show that we did last summer in the White Theater, last Christmas in the smaller theater in the White Theater. But David has designed those all on his iPad. So those are completely done on the computer. He's drawn them, colored them, shaded them, everything on the computer. And the other things on this page are my work. In the upper right, you can see Blanche from Streetcar Named Desire. And I drew her, and then I scanned her into the computer. And then I also scanned in some fabric that was white and had daisies on it, and I scaled it down. And then in the computer, I put it into the drawing so that it could be the scale that it would be on the body. This is a good way to talk to a director who, when they see the big fabric, because it's bigger than your rendering, which is, only about this big, it's an easy way to communicate that and to show it for them. The bottom right there, that is a way of doing collages, and also the middle one is a way of doing collage. The middle one is from Triumph of Love. It's the only thing painted on this green paper is his head, his hands, his feet, and the shadow behind him. Everything else is textured colored paper, cut out and collaged and put on him to show the roots on his pants, the vegetables on his vest. And then the bottom right is from Striking 12, where this one kind of, I'm gonna take one more sip. Talking makes my mouth dry. The bottom right is a method of collage that some people use. It's kind of like you're building a closet for a character. So you may pick out some looks from magazines, and you're like, it could be these pants or these pants, but you pick out one or two from a set of things that you've picked. Striking 12 was, it's based on The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen, and it was written by the band that also performed it. They're called Groove Lily. And so the show was like a one act. They would do the one act Striking 12, take an intermission, and then come back and do a concert of their work from their albums. They had several albums at the time. So there is a diagonal line through the middle of that. So the top half of that is what I was showing that she would wear in the show, this character, and her name's Valerie. And then the bottom half is what she would wear after intermission. So that bottom half, it represents more like a stylist work, right? So I wasn't designing it for Striking 12 or The Little Match Girl. I was designing it for Valerie Vagoda to perform with Groove Lily on stage. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's so cool to think that those sketches are going to turn into real costumes representing real people from different times, different countries, places. It's pretty incredible. But other than the designing aspect of being a costume designer, what other jobs are there in just being a costume shopper, I guess?
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs in the costume shop. So, and there's more than you think. I counted up the list of job descriptions in the Globe, and we have 17 different positions in the costume shop at the Globe. So there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to start off with the costume shop area. So the office area, we have our costume director, shop manager. It depends on which term they prefer. It's slightly different in different theaters. Ours is costume director. We have a costume director, and she oversees all the areas of the costume shop that we're going to talk about as we go along. There's also design assistants and design associates. So that's what I do at the Globe. I'm a design assistant. We talked about David Reynoso earlier. I've assisted him a few times on shows, but then I'm also an associate, the associate costume designer on the Grinch. So the difference between an assistant and an associate is basically the associate has a lot of times more experience and more responsibility for the look of the show. So Robert Morgan designed the Grinch costumes back in the late 90s. And every year when we do this production, he doesn't come back every year to see that the costumes are put back on stage and they look good and they're correct. I do that as the associate. So every remounting of that particular show, I oversee that and make sure everything looks the way it did the very first year. Sometimes if we have something that we need to remake because it's been 20 something years, I will swatch fabric, but I'll be in contact with him and make sure that he approves of the new fabric we're using if we have to replace a costume. But, and this is also what they do, you know, if you see something that's on Broadway and then it goes into a national tour. So the national tour is the same costume sets, everything as Broadway, but they don't, the costume designer from Broadway doesn't oversee the building of the costumes for the national tour because they have moved on to the next show so that they can keep their schedule going. So they'll have an associate designer who will take over that aspect of it and will rebuild the touring show, the national tour. We also have shopper buyer in the shop, and I also do that at the Globe. So I'm an assistant designer and a shopper buyer. And that person purchased, me, I purchase everything in the costume shop. All the pins, the safety pins, the needles, the thread, the inside, the shoulder pads, the inside stuff of suits, the tailoring materials, the muslin, all of that. And then also sometimes if there's another assistant who needs a hand with buying something, if I'm out getting laundry detergent for the dressers and they need t-shirts, then I can, you know, pick that up. Stuff like that. So I'll help them out with online purchase or picking up stuff for them as well. And then we have the assistant to the costume director who assists the costume director. So that person is in charge of doing like a lot of paperwork and a lot of keeping track of people, whatever the costume director needs them to do. They are also keep track of the ledger in our costume shop of the money we spend on the shows and keeps all that financial stuff straight and going. We make a lot of charts as assistant designers. There's a few of them. So you can see, I'm going to start with the one across the bottom. That's a scene chart. So we do one of those for every show, and it has all the actors listed on the left, and then across the top is each page number or each scene. And then we write in that page what they're wearing. The very first column there is a throughout. It says throughout at the top. That's things that they wear throughout the entire show. So that gets listed once and not mentioned again. You know, it's usually like socks and stuff like that. You know, you don't take off. And then from the scene chart, we make a dressing list. So that's in the upper left corner. And the dressing list is just one actor. So the scene chart is every actor in every scene, all the things they're wearing. And the dressing list is just one actor in all the scenes and all the things that they're wearing. So that they have a copy of this in their dressing room on the mirror. And then the dressers also have a copy of it so they know what to put them in when. We'll talk about dressers later. We're coming to that. And then the upper right corner is just a chart. It's the Madness of George III shoe chart I wrote across the top there. So when we have a big show, that was out on the festival stage. So there was a lot of actors, at least 19 I can see printed on there, but I bet there was probably into the 20s and a lot of the Shakespeare's. We really need to, it's hard, you know, you can remember 5 people. If there's a show with 5 people, you can remember 5 pairs of shoes. But if it's a big show like this, you need a chart to be able to keep that all straight. Sometimes a lot of them play more than one character as well. I also do stuff like this for the Grinch because I do a tight chart, especially because each character, some of the characters have different kinds of tights. And that way I know what to order and who wears what, and I can keep that straight. So that's charts.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. Like there's a lot of planning and preparation that goes into just being an office worker in a costume shop. But let's leave the office a little bit. Let's get more into the hands-on parts of being a costume designer. Can you tell us a little bit about what's it like on the costume shop floor?
Yes. So out in the costume shop, if anybody's taken a tour of the costume shop, it's a big room and there's a bunch of tables. There are all these huge tables that are like 6 by 8 feet and they're about counter height. And we have different teams in the costume shops. So we have a draper, tailor, cutter. It kind of depends on how the person, what term the person prefers, and also how they work. So a tailor is a lot of times men's wear. It can also be women's wear if they're wearing a tailored suit, but anything that involves tailoring, like suiting, is a tailor. And then a draper cutter will make the more, women's dresses, drapey things, and it'll depend on their preference. So drapers usually use the dress form and they'll drape fabric, muslin, over the dress form, and they'll figure out where they want seams and stuff. I've seen some episodes of Project Runway where they'll have tape on the form where they're taping out where they want the seams to be. So they're sort of doing a version of draping as well. A cutter does something called flat patterning. So it's on the table, this flat paper on the table. And there's different kinds of ways to do that. Books you can study on flat patterning, or they're called slopers, sometimes the patterns. But that takes a lot of math. A lot of math is involved in cutter. So if you're good with numbers, then that might be the way to go. We also have assistant cutter or first hand, and they will just do that, help the cutter, and the draper, the tailor. So they'll take the patterns that the cutter, draper, tailor, cutter has made, and they'll cut out the fabric and they'll pass things along to the stitcher. So the stitcher sews the costumes together. It's pretty self-explanatory. So stitches the costume together and does alterations. If we do a modern show, they'll also help work on alterations. I have some pictures that you might find interesting. Look at these, they're lovely. So that top row is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the dress forms all the way to the left, and just different patterning. The one in the center on the top there is a paper pattern. The difference between paper patterns and home patterns are that, like patterns you get from McCall's at the fabric store or whatever. Those tissue ones, those have seam allowances built into the pattern. So they have a seam allowance in the side seams of the shoulders where you match it up and you sew, and there's a little bit of fabric on the inside. With theater patterns, we don't do that. So what the person will do, will trace out that paper pattern, and then they'll put the seam allowances where they need them. And so it might not be the same amount all the way around. It might be an inch here, 2 inches there, or half an inch or whatever. The second row, the picture all the way to the left, is a woman in like a tailored suit. So that's something that a tailor would do, but that's not menswear. Right next to her, that fabric in that skirt, that's from As You Like It, was designed by David Reynoso that we talked about earlier. That skirt fabric is $150 a yard.
Wow.
So we do mock-ups on costumes before, so we don't end up cutting into super expensive fabric. We'll do a mock-up beforehand out of muslin, which is in the top row, the second from the right, that was muslin there. So we'll do it out of muslin first because it's inexpensive fabric, and then we'll figure it out, fit on the person, make sure everything we need is right with the pattern before we cut into the fabric. The center picture on the top, in the middle, is a vest, and that is the most brilliant pattern matching I've ever seen in my life. So this was cut out by Susan Socks, who is a first hand at the Globe, and she has matched the pattern so well. So that it opens down the center front, but you can hardly see where it meets because she's matched the pattern. This vest has 4 welt pockets that you can't see. They're completely invisible. And because the pattern is matched so well. So the actor, once he was fit in this vest, realized that maybe there was a bit of business he could put into his character on stage. There's at one point where he was paying somebody some money. This was from the underpants that we did on the white, where he was paying somebody some money, and he just kept pulling coins out of different pockets. And you couldn't even tell where he was pulling this money from because he had all these invisible pockets in his vest. the bottom row is just some more pictures of draping and some petticoats and stuff, but I want to draw particular attention before we move on to the dress in the middle on the far right, that orange dress. So that dress is from Taming of the Shrew. It was designed by Lewis Brown, who I showed you earlier when we were looking at renderings, that I said he renders in acrylic paints. So he actually gifted me, I assisted him on that show, the rendering. So this is the rendering of that dress. You can see he has a research picture right there. And so this is his acrylic painting of that dress. Oh, and also a swatch of the fabric under this acetate paper. Yeah. So I just think it's fun to see how it looks from actual rendering to actual dress.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Just like, wow, that was awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question about something that's not necessarily the actual costume clothing part of it, but it's still a part of, costumes and stuff. Can you tell me about what happens when you're making accessories? Like, who does that? And does that happen separately from the costume floor? Or can you just tell us a little bit about accessories in costume making?
Yes, I love talking about accessories. Who doesn't? Accessories, jewelry, hats, purses, fans, parasols, headpieces, mask, armor, sword belts, holsters, pistols, baldricks. Baldricks not on that list. Lots of things. There's many, many other things that aren't listed there that the crafts department does. And so usually when we talk in the costume shop, we talk about crafts in the dye room together. There's a craft supervisor who's in charge of all that, of the whole area. And assigning different tasks to different people. We also have a dyer painter at the Globe. The same person, Kristen Womble, is our craft supervisor and the dyer painter, but they will do any dyeing and painting that you need on show, or printing, any fabric treatments, anything that is washing down. A lot of times we might build something new that the character is supposed to have had for a really long time, or we buy something new that's supposed to look old and worn out. So that stuff will go into the craft area to be distressed once we get it. Then we also have milliners. Milliners make hats and headpieces, any of the stuff that's on their head. And then in that department, there's also craft artisans who are assigned to work on different projects. So they might be working on some sort of accessory, or they might be helping with a hat, or they might be rubbering shoes. We put dance rubber on the sole of all the shoes that go on stage that keep people from slipping and sliding when they're on stage. So all that is the crafts department. And then I think we have some pictures. Yes. So the upper left, that is a picture of the dye room specifically. And you see the second picture from the left, that tall silver thing. So that's the dye vat. So I think that kind of thing is also used as a soup tureen, like somebody makes gallons and gallons of soup, but we use it as a dye vat. So you can also dye things in a washing machine, but if you have like a really big piece of fabric that you need to dye, it's good to have a dye vat. And then there's just some examples of hats and masks. All the way to the right is on the top is a military hat called a Shako hat. And those were from like the early 1800s was when the play was set that this was in. It was in Much Ado About Nothing. And historically is horsehair that comes out of the top of the hat. And you can actually still get horsehair online. So I think it's probably for people who are working, doing reproductions, military things. So we bought that online. To the left, the middle left and the bottom left are examples of the dyeing that I was talking about earlier that Kristen does for us. There's ombre dyeing. And then on the bottom, some examples of a resist kind of dye called shibori, which is sort of like tie-dye. There's a bunch of different techniques. Tie-dye is one of them. And then on the far right, in the bottom, there's a couple things there so the second from the right on the bottom, that's the hat and shoes from the costume I was telling you about before that had $150 a yard skirt. That's our hat and shoes. So our milliner made that hat. And then directly above that is a cube from The Tempest. So, and then to the right is a picture of Ariel from The Tempest, and that is a mask with a little fan on the top, that little ruff. That's an iridescent shower curtain that we bought online. And we put it into that ruff. It gave us the look. David Reynoso designed that, and it gave him the look he was looking for. So we repurposed a shower curtain into fabric. And then back to the cube, that's a acrylic cube. It was from the same play. It was from the goddesses who were supposed to look like the Supremes. So they had this acrylic cube and then this beautifully finger wave wig underneath the cube. So that. Whoop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that as an actor, one of the things that I do a lot is I have to wear wigs, just like you said with the goddesses. And I mean, sometimes you can ask an actor to change their hair or get a haircut or things like that. But I mean, you can't ask for a haircut for everything, and you can't ask actors to dye their hair multiple colors. So can you tell me about the process that goes into making wigs and even makeup? Makeup is a big part of that too. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, sometimes we will use an actor's hair, but it kind of depends on what's required. So yeah, it happens a lot. Even if it's like their normal hair color, but it's an elaborately styled, hairdo, we'll use a wig because the actors only have half an hour to get ready. So there's no time to like totally give yourself an updo in half an hour and get dressed and everything. So yeah, we use wigs a lot. And in that department, we have a wig supervisor who is in charge of everything. So the wig supervisor makes assignments to the people on her team about what they're going to make. And she's also in charge of makeup charts and all that kind of paperwork. There's an assistant wig and makeup supervisor who is like her right hand. I keep saying her, and it is a her at our costume shop, but I don't want to say that it has to be a her. So I'm trying to say they. Yeah, and they're the person in charge right under her. So they're the first hand, the second in charge, and then we have other people that work in that department that build sign projects as well.
Oh, you're on mute.
I did not put myself on mute. Am I not on mute now?
You're good now.
Okay, good. So here's some pictures from the wig shop. On upper left corner is a wig dryer. And then across the top, you can see some different styled wigs. Right to the right, all the way to the right, is some makeup palettes. That's Krylon. So we have those sample palettes. So when we need to order some makeup, we can find the exact number of the color we want. There's a makeup chart that sometimes we'll use the makeup chart. We'll just use makeup even to color in the chart to show the actor what we want them to do. In the center there, you can see where it has the hairs and the knots, and you can see sort of the density of ventilating. So they will, it's sort of like tiny latch hook rug. So they'll latch hook that together to give the really fine hairline back into maybe fuller parts of the hair. Right below that is scars. So we can make scars sometime. Those are silicone scars, a product called Third Degree. We can make those for the actors. Yeah, and then there's just the canvas block there. So that's what they use to make the wigs. They'll get the actor in and they'll do their hair prep. They'll put, pin curls, however they want to flatten their hair. They'll put saran wrap over that and then tape over that. It's kind of funny process to watch when somebody does that. And then they get their hairline drawn on with a marker, and then the wig shop can use that as a template for making the wig for them. So they'll put it on the canvas block with Easter grass in the middle to take up the space of their actor's hair. And that's why they have that to make those wigs.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of preparation that goes into making costumes and making wigs and coming up with makeup looks. Like, that's a lot of energy and effort put into just getting the show on its feet, I guess.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, once the show actually starts, like once we've gotten into previews or actual shows, I hope you guys aren't just sitting around backstage doing nothing. What do you guys do once the show actually starts?
Yeah, no, it's very busy backstage during a show. They need help. The actors need help. So backstage crew, they have a lot going on with acting on stage. They need a little help in between. So backstage, we have a wardrobe supervisor who's in charge of all the dressers and the wig run crew. And sometimes at the Globe, we'll have all three stages going at once. So we have one supervisor that's supervising dressers in three different areas, three different stages. And the dressers are assigned people in the cast. So, you know, the festival has like 20 something people in it. So they're assigned a certain number of actors. And then for those actors that they're assigned, each dresser, they prep the clothes by steaming or pressing them according to what the assistant designer or the designer wants. And then they'll preset the show. Like if somebody has a quick change, they'll move it to a certain part of the backstage area for the quick change. And they'll help them get dressed at the beginning of the show and help with the quick changes. Then once the show's done, they will take care of laundry, first of all. So the layer closest to the actor's skin gets washed after every performance. So that's t-shirts, socks, stuff like that. And then if it's a modern show and it's dress shirts or jeans or something that can be washed, they'll wash those. The dry cleaning goes out once a week, but they don't send out the whole show. They'll send out parts of the show. So the stuff that doesn't get sent out between dry cleaning, we use an old Russian ballet trick, because those ballet costumes are tutus and they're encrusted with, you know, metallic thread. They can't really be dry cleaned. So you can get vodka, because vodka has no odor itself, and you kind of spray the clothes with vodka on the inside, and the alcohol helps neutralize some of those bacteria that are causing odors in between dry cleaning. They still go, I mean, they still go out for dry cleaning, but you know, they have to take a turn. And then we also have the wigs run crew, and they are like similar to the dressers, except for they do wigs. So if somebody changes their wig in a quick change, or puts facial hair on, or takes it off, or has some sort of makeup change, say they're playing a cat in one character, one scene, and then the next scene they're not, and they need somebody to help them get their whiskers off their face, then the wig run crew will help them do that and move into the next scene. So I think we have some backstage pictures.
Ooh.
So the upper left there is where we do laundry. So we're lucky that our laundry room is separate from our dye room, so that we don't have to worry about floating dye particles when we're doing show laundry, which is great. Oh, that bar there with like elastic hanging down, those are mic belts. So whenever we do a musical or we're out on the festival stage, actors wear mics, and they're held, their little pack is held in that. And then there's a picture, that's the Globe dresser station. The top right two pictures are the Globe's dresser station. And then the bottom left in the corner is a dressing room that should look familiar to you.
It does,
Katrina.
Oh my gosh, my Grinch days come back
Your
to
Grinch
me.
days. That's the girls' dressing room for the Grinch. And then that's the hallway. And then that big picture at the bottom, second from the left, is a picture of one of the dressing rooms out in the White Theater. So when we have the summer shows, the festival, there are no dressing rooms outside. So they are in some of the dressing rooms in the Globe. And then there, a lot of times we use this particular dressing room that I've taken a picture of here, because it's closest to the outside door that goes to the festival. And it's the biggest room, so it's useful for that. Then the bottom right is just the dresser station in the White Theater. So there's a steamer there, they can steam clothes. If they need to press clothes, they do it in the Globe, which is that picture, the Globe dresser station, which is the picture on the top, second from the right. They have that sturdy wooden ironing board there to iron things on. In the costume shop itself, they have a big table that's like 4x6, 4x8 big table that's padded and very sturdy, because they're ironing big pieces of fabric before they sew it. But the dressers don't need that big of a spot. So they just have a normal ironing board shape, but it's just meatier, stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just looking at those pictures of backstage, I miss live theater. Come back. Come on. Okay.
Yes.
So I think we've officially finished the interview, but if you have any questions, please put them in the Facebook chat, in the YouTube chat. I don't know how those work, but we're going to begin the Q&A. And before we begin, I have to admit, I do have a question for you, Shelly. I know that you are a costume designer first, but out of all of the more hands-on activities, from the stitching to the cutting to the dyeing, which of those is your favorite?
Well, I have had some experience in different areas in the costume shop at the Globe. When I was in graduate school at SDSU, I worked in different areas in the shop, like spring break, in the summer while I was still in school. The first one I worked at was on the shop floor as a stitcher. and I was assigned to a tailor that now works for the San Diego Opera. Her name's Ingrid Helton. And I stitched something for her that she asked me to stitch, and I came up and showed it to her, and she was like, oh, okay. And I was reassigned to hand sewing. I was hand sewing some ruffs. So yeah, my stitching wasn't up to par for the Globe stage. And Ingrid is so good, and she's so nice. I love her. So I wasn't upset. I understand that maybe it's not my calling. Let me try something else. So the next time I worked in the crafts department. And when I was there, we were doing Romeo and Juliet out on the festival stage. It was the late 90s. And Neil Patrick Harris was playing Romeo in that particular production. And we were taking life casts of his face and 2 other actors. So I'm familiar with that because my bachelor's degree is in costume and makeup design. And we use it a lot in makeup design too, where you take a cast of the person's face so that you can build prosthetic noses or cheeks or ears, whatever you're doing. So we needed it in this particular production because we were going to build like just a regular mask, but it had to look exactly like their face. So we took that mask. There's components of it's made of plaster and it's really heavy. And there's components of that you have to stir, and they're very sensitive to humidity, whatever. So me and a coworker were stirring this up, and I'm stirring while she's slowly pouring the powder in, and I'm stirring, and it started to go completely wrong. And I needed her to stop pouring, but for some reason I had lost the power of speech. So I just started going, abort, abort, abort. And she stopped pouring, and we could hear Neil laughing from the other room. It's like, I don't know how to talk now.
Hey, you got the message across. She stopped, it worked, right?
Stop. I couldn't think of stop, but I could think of abort.
Hey, same thing, right?
Same thing. They're synonyms.
Okay.
So there were other things in the crafts area that I was were hard for me. I would have to ask, not sure if I really know how to do this. Somebody has to walk me through it. So then later I worked as a dresser. I worked in the wardrobe area, and that was my spot. That is what I would do if I wasn't assistant designer shopper. I really enjoyed working in the wardrobe area and dressing shows and doing stuff with them. Yeah, that was great.
Well, that's awesome. And we do have a few more questions coming in. So someone put, so you mentioned ways to communicate my designs, but I don't have artistic skills just yet. How do you recommend that I get started?
So, well, you can still, even if you can't draw or don't want to draw, you could still collage if you were doing something. So that was one where you can take out pictures from a magazine to show what you're looking for. But you can also just kind of give yourself a task to like draw something every day and just keep doing it, even if it's not a design for a show, even if it's not a costume, even if it's just whatever you see. If you can see it and draw it, you can translate it to costumes later. So, and you could also maybe take some classes, some online classes in drawing. You could take life drawing classes, or there's many things out there right now I think you can do, but it's not required. So, you can find other ways to communicate that don't involve you doing acrylic paintings like Lewis Brown. I can't even do that.
Oh yeah, neither can I. I mean, I definitely could say that my artistic skills are not really up to the standards, but I mean, that's a great way to be able to communicate your ideas. We have another question. What does reading people mean, and how do you learn or get better at that?
Yes. Reading people, I feel like you're reading the room, and then you can just notice by little things they say or their body language when you're showing them stuff, or I don't know exactly. That's a good question, because that's reading people is hard to put into words, but it's just like a feeling you get from them, and you can see that somebody's uncomfortable. It's a lot about body language. It's a lot about little things they say. They might say something. I remember I was in a fitting with somebody who was like really self-conscious about her stomach and the way it looked in a particular dress. And I noticed she would like put her hands there a lot. And so then you're like, tell me what you think. What are you thinking? Like, give them a chance to like explain what they're saying. And then she talked about it, and I said, and it's also when you're designing, it's like building trust with them and reassuring them that I'm not going to put you in anything that makes you look bad. I mean, that doesn't help me either. So, we're on the same page. I'm getting this together and making it look good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Yeah. Just read body language and
Yeah.
I bet that person who asked how can they get better at it probably is better than they think they are at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Just the awareness of being better at it or something. But okay, another one is, in what other area of theater would you love to work in if you could choose?
Oh, another design field? Oh, that's interesting.
Or you could be like, I want to be an actor.
Well, I tried that a little bit. I don't know. When I was in grad school, they have you take courses in other design fields.
Mm.
So I did take a set design class and a lighting design. I have to say, I think I liked lighting design better. I took a sound design class, but the sound design class that I took was way back at the school, like not long after I got out of high school. Mm-hmm. So it was late 80s, early 90s, I'm embarrassed to say, but that sound class was so hard and it was still like reel to reel. So when we had to edit something, we had to like clip this little reel and stick it back together. And it was complicated. Mm-hmm. So I'll say lighting. I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah, lighting's awesome. Just being a lighting designer, that'd be awesome. Okay, so another question. For both of you, what are you working on now, costumes related or not? You can go first, Shelly.
I can go first. Well, what excuse me, while we're not at the Globe, I'm working at home with the Globe, still doing different projects. A few things that I can't talk about the Globe, but other than that, they have to tell you themselves. Other than that, I'm also just working on, earlier this week, that was a hard question. Look at me try to figure out what I'm working on. Earlier this week, we had among the staff, a fun little thing we did is we made crafts of little masks and they asked me to kind of figure out what would be fun to do. And I got toilet paper rolls. So that's something I've been working on, like looking at toilet paper rolls, how they could fit together to make a mask. Yeah.
Hey, that's cool. That's really creative. Honestly, that's really cool. What am I working on now? Well, so I'm 15 and I'm a sophomore in high school, and there haven't been. So I did a couple things. I did the Summer Shakespeare Studio, and I did another thing at Diversionary that was a few weeks ago. But right now, theater-wise, not much. It's crazy times. Theater is very different to the way that we're doing everything. Also in my theater class at my high school, we're trying to figure out how we can do a virtual performance if we can do that. Because, we're still trying, I think theater everywhere in San Diego is pushing the boundaries of what we can do virtually. And while virtual theater is never going to replace actual theater, like live theater, I think it's such a great substitute for it right now. But as of right now, I'm not working on anything currently, just, being a normal teenager, well, as normal as I can be during a pandemic, and
right.
Just, doing that. And someone put, I think I'm too young to work at the theater, so how do I get experience now? I'm 14.
Well, there's a lot of, some of the theaters in town have programs for younger people, for youth. There's different classes at different theaters. Mm-hmm. You could get into that, do it that way. And you could just, you can do your own theater in your own living room or your own house or backyard or something. You can just get creative. I know that Arts Engagement had another program they called the Living Room Play Workshop that talked about that. So there's different ways. You have to get creative now because of the pandemic, but I think there's different things you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, there are things that you could just do at home. I know for one of the things for the, if you're interested in makeup, one of the makeup design things where you, like the paper that has the face on it, you can print those up at home and work on it by yourself. There are plenty of opportunities at home. It's very weird times again, but we're figuring it out. Someone has a question about the theater design studio. Can you go a little bit into detail about that?
I can't. I don't know anything about that. Is that, what is that, another program?
Theater Design Studio. Yes, it is another program.
I believe, is that the one where it would be an entire week for scenic design and then an entire week for costume design. Yes. So I've heard about it, but a colleague of mine, her name's Charlotte DeVoe, she did the costume part of that. So I don't have too many details about that. It seems like a great program. I mean, I think that you can kind of, it's interesting to spend an entire week in one discipline and then move on to the next discipline. So you get more detail than you would in like, we're just going to do it for an hour today and then we're going to move on to something else. So
yeah, I also heard that it's going to be happening next year. So if you're interested in that, you can email the Globe. But I think that's all the questions that we've received. So thank you so much, Shelly, for talking to me. That was awesome. Such a fun hour, I guess. And I will toss it back to Vietka. Thank you.
Hello, you all. That was so informative. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, but you were special requested for this episode.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and Shelly's she's been on a lot of our programs that we've had digitally, and so she's always fun to have. And so when I asked her if she had a Halloween costume, of course she had a Halloween costume. She literally threw that together today. So yeah, you're the perfect person for our guest this week for our Halloween special. So thank you, Shelly, and thank you, Katrina, for taking time out of your busy, normal teenage life to spend time with us.
Of course, it was so much fun. I loved it. It was so much fun.
Oh, good. So I will just sign off and thank everyone for coming on for today's episode. Happy Halloween. And then next week we'll have another episode. And just so you know, we are having a few more episodes and we'll take a break starting Thanksgiving weekend. And so we just have a few more episodes with you guys. We're really excited to have a couple more guests for you. And please be safe this weekend, no matter what you're doing. And we will see you soon. Take care. Next week, 3:30.